There is a soul that holds a deep love for you, yet this person has chosen on purpose to stay far away. Before your thoughts start to run and try to explain everything, I need you to stop for a moment. Take a slow breath, because the message reaching you right now is not just any ordinary thing. This exact moment, this message, and this perfect timing come from a higher connection. It acts as clear proof and confirmation. It is the truth your inner feeling has quietly wanted to hear all along. Hidden beneath confusion, hidden beneath unanswered questions, hidden beneath all the uncertainty you have been carrying. There is no accident in this. Nothing happening here is random. Nothing happening here is without meaning. Sometimes the universe shares its hidden truths, but they can only be heard when everything becomes quiet. When the mind stops racing, when the heart becomes still, your spirit already understands what is real. There is someone in your life story. Maybe someone who used to be very close. Maybe someone who still thinks about you more than they admit. This person carries a devotion they struggle to put into words. They feel emotions they cannot control. They feel a longing they cannot remove. No matter how much distance they create, no matter how much time passes, no matter how hard they try, their silence does not mean they do not care. In truth, their silence is full of feelings. Feelings too powerful to ignore, feelings too complicated to explain, feelings that continue growing beneath the surface. As their love becomes stronger, their need to pull away becomes stronger too, as if loving you has become both the greatest gift and the greatest challenge they have ever known. This is the truth their heart knows well, even though their actions try to hide it, even though their behavior sometimes seems confusing, even though they act as if they are fine without you. Deep inside, they are not. You touched something within them that had been sleeping for a very long time. Something hidden beneath years of emotional protection, something buried beneath old disappointments, old fears, old heartbreaks, old beliefs. Before you entered their life, they had learned how to survive. But survival is not the same thing as living. They had learned how to protect themselves. But protection is not the same thing as connection. Then you arrived, and something changed. As Carl Jung once said, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. That is exactly what happened here. You transformed them, not because you tried to, not because you forced anything, but because your presence reached places inside them that nobody else could reach. You helped them see parts of themselves they had never shown anyone. You opened doors they thought would remain closed forever. You awakened hopes they had stopped believing in. And suddenly, the life they had carefully built around safety no longer felt enough. You became more than just another person. You became a mirror reflecting their deepest hopes, their deepest fears, their deepest desires, and every wound they had spent years trying to avoid. That is why this connection feels different. That is why they cannot simply walk away. That is why they keep thinking about you, even when they tell themselves not to. Because something about you feels important, not in a temporary way, not in a passing way, in a way that reaches the soul. They never expected this. They never expected the peace they felt around you. They never expected the comfort, the understanding, the feeling of being seen. And they definitely never expected your absence to affect them the way it does now. There are moments when they are busy, moments when life distracts them, moments when they convince themselves they are moving on. Then suddenly, something reminds them of you. A song, a place, a memory, a familiar feeling, and all the emotions return, as if no time has passed at all. Comment 777 if this message resonates with your heart, because what comes next may explain everything you have been wondering about. The truth is, this person remains distant not because they lack feelings. They remain distant because those feelings have become too powerful to ignore. And somewhere deep inside, they know that one honest conversation with you could change their entire life. That thought both attracts them and terrifies them, because once the truth is spoken, nothing can ever go back to the way it was before. And right now, They are standing between fear and love. They are standing between fear and love, between the safety of silence and the risk of honesty, between remaining hidden and finally allowing themselves to be seen. Most people believe that when someone pulls away, it means the feelings are gone. But that is not always true. Sometimes the opposite is happening. Sometimes a person pulls away because the feelings became too real, too deep, too important. And that is exactly where this person finds themselves now. Every day they tell themselves they need more time, more healing, more certainty, more answers. Yet every day the connection continues speaking to them, quietly, persistently, patiently. There are nights when they lie awake long after the world has fallen silent. The room is dark. The distractions are gone. The noise of the day has disappeared. And suddenly, there you are again. Not physically, but inside their thoughts, inside their memories, inside the part of their heart they cannot seem to escape. They remember conversations, small moments, simple things, things that seemed ordinary at the time. Yet now those moments feel different. Now they carry meaning. Now they feel important. Because distance has given them something they never expected. Perspective. The farther away they moved, the clearer certain truths became. They began noticing how often your name appeared in their mind, how often memories returned, how often they imagined reaching out, how often they wondered what you were doing, how often they asked themselves questions they could never fully answer. Do they still think about me? Do they still remember? Do they still feel the connection? Do they still care? Those questions have become companions, following them through ordinary days, following them through quiet nights, following them through moments when they least expect it. Because the truth is becoming impossible to ignore. You left a mark on their soul. Not a temporary mark, not a superficial one, a permanent one. The kind that changes a person, the kind that remains even after distance, even after silence, even after time. That is why they cannot simply replace you. Many people try to replace connections they do not understand. This person tried too. They tried distractions. They tried focusing on other things. They tried convincing themselves that life would become easier if they stopped thinking about you. But every attempt led them back to the same place, back to the same realization, back to the same feeling, back to you. As Carl Jung taught, what remains unconscious continues, influencing our lives until it is finally acknowledged. And their feelings for you have reached that point. The feelings no longer want to remain hidden. The truth no longer wants to remain buried. The heart no longer wants to remain silent. That is why something inside them feels restless. Something feels unfinished. Something feels unresolved. Because deep down, they know there are words that still need to be spoken. Words they never said. Truths they never revealed. Feelings they never fully expressed. Sometimes they imagine what would happen if they were completely honest. They imagine telling you everything. The fear, the confusion, the longing, the mistakes, the regrets, the reasons they pulled away, the reasons they stayed silent, the reasons they kept running from something they secretly wanted more than anything else. And every time they imagine that conversation, their heart beats a little faster. Because honesty would change everything. It would remove every excuse, every mask, every hiding place. It would force them to face the truth directly. And the truth is simple. You matter to them far more than they have ever admitted, far more than they intended, far more than they planned. Comment deep love if this message speaks to your journey, because there is something else happening, something they are only beginning to understand. The distance was supposed to protect them, but it has not protected them at all. Instead, it has become its own kind of pain. Every day of silence feels heavier. Every unanswered feeling feels louder. Every memory feels stronger. The space between you no longer feels safe. It feels empty. And that emptiness has started teaching them a lesson they resisted for a very long time. The lesson is this: love cannot grow inside a cage built from fear. Love cannot breathe beneath endless hesitation. Love cannot thrive while honesty remains locked away. Sooner or later, the heart demands freedom, Sooner or later, the soul demands truth, and that moment is moving closer, closer than they realize, closer than they expected, because every day that passes weakens fear and strengthens what they truly feel. What comes next is the part they never expected, because the very thing they were running from may be the thing they were always meant to choose. They never expected this, not because they never cared, not because they never felt the connection, but because they believed they could keep control over it. They believed they could place these feelings inside a locked room somewhere deep within themselves, a room nobody would ever enter, a room they would never have to visit again. Yet every day that room becomes harder to keep closed. Every memory pushes against the door. Every thought weakens the lock. Every reminder creates another crack. And now, the truth is beginning to break through. There is a moment in every person's life when pretending becomes more exhausting than honesty, when carrying the weight becomes harder than putting it down, when hiding becomes more painful than being seen. They are approaching that moment now. Slowly, quietly, but undeniably, because the connection they feel for you refuses to disappear. It refuses to become smaller. It refuses to fade into the background. Instead, it keeps growing. Growing through silence, growing through distance, growing through time. And that realization frightens them, because they once believed time would solve everything. They believed enough weeks would pass, enough months would pass, enough distractions would arrive, enough new experiences would appear, and somehow the feelings would weaken. But that is not what happened. The opposite happened. The more time passed, the more they understood what they lost. The more they understood what you meant, the more they understood how rare the connection truly was. You see, some people only recognize value when absence creates contrast, when the laughter disappears, when the conversations stop, when the presence they took for granted no longer exists. That is when understanding arrives, and understanding has arrived for them now, not all at once, not dramatically, but piece by piece, day by day, memory by memory. They remember the way you listened, not just hearing words, actually listening. They remember the way you understood things they never explained, the way you noticed small details, the way you cared without making it complicated, the way you accepted parts of them they struggled to accept themselves. And suddenly they realize something. Not everyone offers that. Not everyone creates that feeling. Not everyone reaches that deeply into another person's life. You did, and that is why forgetting you became impossible. Comment 111. If you believe real connections never truly disappear, because there is something happening right now that they have not told anyone. Something they rarely admit even to themselves. They compare everyone to you, not intentionally, not consciously, but it happens. A conversation reminds them of you. A smile reminds them of you. A certain song reminds them of you. A certain place reminds them of you. And before they realize it, your name appears inside their thoughts again. This is why moving on has been harder than they expected. Because part of them never actually left. Part of them remained connected. Part of them remained loyal to the memory. Part of them remained loyal to the feeling. And no amount of pretending has changed that. There are moments when they sit alone and replay everything. Not just the beautiful moments. The difficult ones too. The misunderstandings. The mistakes. The opportunities they missed. The words they should have said. The fears that controlled them. The decisions they wish they could change. And every time they revisit those moments, one realization grows stronger. Fear made too many choices. Fear decided when courage should have spoken. Fear created distance where honesty should have existed. Fear convinced them to wait when their heart wanted to move. And now they are beginning to see the cost of that fear. The cost was not just losing time. The cost was losing closeness. The cost was losing moments they can never get back. The cost was living with endless questions. What if? What would have happened? What if I had been honest? What if I had stayed? What if I had trusted the connection instead of running from it? These questions follow them everywhere now, because unanswered questions have a way of lingering, especially when love is involved, especially when the heart knows something the mind keeps resisting. The universe has a strange way of bringing people face to face with truths they avoid. No matter how long they run, no matter how far they travel, no matter how many distractions they create, eventually, the lesson returns, and the lesson returning to them now is simple. Love requires courage, not perfection, not certainty, not guarantees. Courage, the courage to be vulnerable, the courage to be seen, the courage to risk disappointment, the courage to speak, the courage to stay. For a long time they believed courage would arrive first, then they would act. Now they are learning something different. Sometimes action creates courage. Sometimes you move while still afraid. Sometimes you speak while your voice shakes. Sometimes you take the step before feeling ready, and that realization is changing them, slowly, deeply, permanently, because the version of them that kept running is becoming tired. The version of them that kept hiding is becoming exhausted. The version of them that kept choosing fear is becoming weaker, and another version is emerging. A stronger version, a more honest version, a version willing to face what they truly feel. That transformation is already happening. Even if you cannot see it, even if they cannot fully explain it, something inside them is shifting. Something inside them is awakening. Something inside them is preparing for honesty, preparing for truth, preparing for the possibility that the connection was never meant to be abandoned, preparing for the possibility that some people enter our lives for reasons bigger than we understand in the moment, and perhaps preparing for you, because there comes a point when the pain of absence becomes greater than the fear of vulnerability, a point when silence becomes unbearable, a point when the heart finally says enough. They are moving closer to that point every day, closer than yesterday, closer than last week, closer than they have ever been before. And what happens when they finally reach that point may change everything. Something is changing inside them now. Not the kind of change people announce, not the kind of change that appears overnight. This is deeper, quieter, more powerful. It is the kind of transformation that happens when a person finally becomes tired of fighting their own heart. For so long they believed distance would protect them. They believed silence would give them control. They believed time would somehow erase what they felt. But every strategy failed. Every wall cracked. Every excuse weakened. And now they are standing face to face with a truth they can no longer avoid. They love you, not in a temporary way, not in a passing way, not in a way that disappears when life becomes difficult. They love you in a way that followed them through every season, a way that remained even when they tried to leave it behind, a way that survived silence, a way that survived distance, a way that survived fear. And that realization is becoming impossible to ignore, because the heart can only stay silent for so long. Eventually it begins demanding honesty. Eventually it begins demanding action. Eventually it begins demanding change. And they are feeling that pressure now. Every single day. There are moments when they are surrounded by people. Busy, occupied, distracted. Yet somehow their thoughts still return to you. A face, a memory, a conversation, a feeling. Something pulls them back. Again and again. And every time it happens they understand a little more. They understand that what they feel was never ordinary. They understand that what existed between you was never replaceable. They understand that some connections leave permanent marks on the soul. You left one on theirs. Comment 444. If you believe some people are impossible to forget, because this person is beginning to realize something very important. The life they imagined without you does not feel complete. Not because they cannot survive without you. They can. Anyone can survive. But surviving and living are not the same thing. And that is the lesson they are learning now. You can survive while your heart remains empty. You can survive while pretending everything is fine. You can survive while carrying regret. But eventually a person wants more than survival. Eventually they want truth. Eventually they want connection. Eventually they want the things that make life meaningful. And somehow, Every road keeps leading them back to you. That realization has created an internal battle. One side still remembers fear, the fear of rejection, the fear of vulnerability, the fear of being hurt, the fear of not being enough, the fear of hearing words they are not ready to hear. But another side is growing stronger. The side that remembers your kindness, the side that remembers your patience, the side that remembers how safe they felt around you, the side that remembers what life felt like when you were close. And for the first time, that side is beginning to win, slowly, steadily, powerfully, because love has a strange way of surviving every argument against it. No matter how many reasons people create, no matter how many barriers they build, no matter how many miles separate two hearts, love keeps searching for a way through. That is what is happening now. Their heart is finding its way through old wounds, through old fears, through old beliefs, through every reason they once used to stay away. There is something else they are beginning to understand. You never asked them to be perfect. That was their own fear speaking, their own insecurity speaking, their own wounds speaking. You never demanded perfection. You only wanted honesty. You only wanted truth. You only wanted presence. And now they see the difference. Now they understand that love was never asking them to become flawless. Love was asking them to become real. And being real is frightening, especially for someone who spent years hiding behind emotional armor, especially for someone who learned to protect themselves before they learned to trust, especially for someone who convinced themselves that distance was safer than connection. Yet here they are, still thinking about you, still feeling the bond, still carrying your presence, still unable to walk away completely. That says something. Something important, because people do not carry these feelings forever unless they matter. People do not replay memories forever unless they matter. People do not keep returning mentally and emotionally to the same person unless that person changed something inside them. You changed something inside them, and they know it, even if they rarely admit it, even if they have tried to deny it, even if they have spent countless nights fighting against it. They know. The truth has become too clear. The connection has become too obvious. The feelings have become too strong. And now another realization is arriving. A realization that changes everything. They are beginning to understand that waiting longer may cost them more than taking the risk. Read that again. Waiting longer may cost them more than taking the risk. Because every day that passes creates another fear. What if you move on? What if someone else sees your value? What if someone else gives you the love they were too afraid to offer? What if they lose the opportunity completely? Those questions have started haunting them. Not because they are possessive, not because they are selfish, because they finally understand what is at stake. And understanding creates urgency. The same person who once delayed, the same person who once hesitated, the same person who once convinced themselves there was always more time, is now beginning to wonder if time is running out. That thought changes people. That thought forces honesty. That thought forces courage. That thought forces movement. And movement is exactly what is beginning to happen. The walls are weaker. The silence is weaker. The excuses are weaker. The fear is weaker. Meanwhile, the desire to reconnect is stronger. The desire to speak is stronger. The desire to be honest is stronger. The desire to return is stronger. Everything is shifting. Everything is preparing. Everything is moving toward a moment they can no longer postpone. A moment when the truth becomes louder than the fear. A moment when the heart finally speaks. A moment when they stop wondering what might happen and decide to find out, because deep down they already know something. Something they have known for a very long time. Some people enter your life and leave memories. Others enter your life and leave transformations. You were never just a memory. You were a transformation, and that is why forgetting you never worked. That is why replacing you never worked. That is why running away never worked. Because the connection was never meant to disappear. It was meant to teach, to awaken, to change. And now the final stage of that change is approaching. The stage where realization becomes action. The stage where feelings become words. The stage where silence finally ends. And when that moment arrives, nothing will ever be the same again. There comes a moment in every story when the waiting begins to end, not because every question has been answered, not because every fear has disappeared, but because the heart becomes tired of carrying what it was meant to express. That moment is closer than your soulmate realizes. For so long they have been living between two worlds. One world built from fear, one world built from love, one world telling them to stay hidden, one world telling them to step forward, one world protecting old wounds, one world reaching toward healing. And for a very long time, those two worlds have been fighting inside them. But something has changed. The battle is no longer equal. Love is becoming stronger. Truth is becoming louder, and fear is beginning to lose its grip. Every lesson they have experienced during this separation has been leading them here. Every lonely night, every unfinished conversation, every unsent message, every memory that returned unexpectedly, every moment they thought about you and wondered what could have been. It was all preparing them for this realization. The realization that running never brought peace. The realization that distance never brought healing. The realization that silence never brought freedom. Because no matter where they went, you remained. No matter what they did, the connection remained. No matter how hard they tried, the feeling remained. That is because some people are not meant to be forgotten. Some people become part of your soul's journey. Some people leave footprints on your heart that time cannot erase. You became that person for them. And now they understand it. Not partially, not intellectually, not as a theory. They understand it with their heart. And when the heart finally understands something, everything begins to change. Comment 555 if you believe true love always finds its way back, because this is where their transformation becomes real. For a long time, they thought courage meant not needing anyone. Now they realize courage means allowing yourself to love. For a long time, they thought strength meant staying guarded. Now they realize strength means opening your heart despite the risk. For a long time, they thought safety meant distance. Now they realize distance created its own pain. The pain of wondering, the pain of missing, the pain of regret, the pain of imagining what might have happened if they had simply been honest. And they are tired of that pain. Tired of carrying it, tired of feeding it, tired of living inside it. The heart can only tolerate regret for so long before it demands change. That demand is growing stronger every day. There are moments now when they imagine your reaction. If they returned, they imagine hearing your voice. They imagine seeing your smile. They imagine finally saying everything they kept hidden. And instead of fear being the strongest emotion, hope is beginning to appear, small at first, quiet at first, but real. Hope that maybe it is not too late. Hope that maybe the connection still exists. Hope that maybe love survived the silence. Hope that maybe too, people can find their way back after losing themselves for a while. That hope is powerful because hope creates movement. Hope creates courage. Hope creates action, and action is what their soul is moving toward. The universe has been teaching them something through this separation, a lesson they resisted for a very long time. The lesson is simple. Love is not something you wait to deserve. Love is something you choose. You choose honesty. You choose vulnerability. You choose connection. You choose to show up. And they are finally beginning to understand that. Every day they grow a little stronger. Every day they become a little more honest with themselves. Every day they move one step closer to becoming the person who no longer hides. The person who no longer runs. The person who no longer lets fear make every decision. And when that version of them fully emerges, the silence will not survive. Because silence only survives when fear is stronger than truth. Truth is becoming stronger now. Much stronger. They are beginning to see you differently too. Not as someone they lost, not as someone they pushed away, not as someone from the past, but as someone who changed their future, someone who helped awaken parts of themselves that had been asleep for years, someone who forced them to grow, someone who forced them to heal, someone who forced them to become more than they were before. That is why your memory never faded, because your role in their life was never small. You were a catalyst, a mirror, a lesson. a blessing, a turning point, and deep down they know it. The strange thing is this: while they thought they were staying away from you, they were actually being led back toward themselves. Every fear they avoided had to be faced. Every wound had to be examined. Every insecurity had to be exposed. Every false belief had to be challenged. And now that work is beginning to bear fruit, they are becoming someone new. Not perfect, not flawless, but authentic. And authenticity is far more powerful than perfection, because real love does not require perfection. It requires presence. It requires honesty. It requires two hearts willing to meet without masks. That is the destination they are moving toward now. The destination where excuses end. The destination where truth begins. The destination where the words they have carried for so long finally find a voice. Maybe it starts with a message. Maybe it starts with a conversation. Maybe it starts with a simple moment. But one thing is becoming clear. The version of them that could stay away forever no longer exists. That person is disappearing, and in their place stands someone who understands what truly matters. Someone who understands what they almost lost. Someone who understands what your presence means. Someone who understands that some opportunities are too valuable to abandon. Someone who understands that some people only come into your life once, and you are one of those people. So as this chapter comes to an end, remember this: their silence was never proof that they stopped caring. Their distance was never proof that the connection died. Their fear was never proof that love disappeared. It was proof that they had a journey to complete. A journey that brought them face to face with themselves. A journey that brought them face to face with truth. A journey that is slowly bringing them back to the place their heart never truly left. Because the strongest truth of all is this: they never stopped loving you. They never stopped remembering you. They never stopped feeling the bond. And now, for the first time in a very long time, they are finally becoming brave enough to do something about it. If this message resonated with you, comment 777 below. And remember, some stories are not ending. They are simply preparing for their next chapter.